what you know about purification to save the heart of a nation. Let burn a talking wood, bringing light to a talking wood. Not your largest wisdom and love, vision truth below as a bird. Let burn a talking wood, let burn a talking wood.
Welcome to the Affirm Life Daily Podcast. I'm Cynthia Mitchell, your host. As always, visit the website, affirmlifedaily.com, for more information on natural law. Watch previous podcasts, check out the affirmations, tons of resources on there. So please check it out at your earliest convenience and follow on social media at Affirm Life Daily. So I want to introduce a very special guest today. So I have Shani Goodson with me. And she's going to be talking with me about intolerance and rejecting difference. So I'm going to give a little introduction so you can learn more about her. She is a pretty phenomenal woman, and I don't want to miss a beat when it comes to her introduction. So I'm sorry. Hold on one second. Okay. Shani is an educator, scientist, and a mother of three whose work explores the intersection of personal liberation, relational transformation, and systematic change. Drawing from her background in science and her lived experience as a parent, lover, and lifelong student of human behavior, she writes about the nuanced ways of power, conditioning, and connection shape our lives. She invites readers to question the status quo, reimagine relationships, and move toward more intentional, liberated ways of being with themselves and with each other. Love that, love that, love that. Welcome, Shani.
Thanks. I'm so glad to be here. This was a really fun topic to talk about. So I was excited that you were excited.
Yes, I'm very excited. I think it's a topic that has gotten so, I guess, almost just misconstrued nowadays. There's just because there's so much hypersensitivity about everything. It can be hard for people to even just have conversations like this anymore, unfortunately. Anything that hurts someone's feelings is off limits these days. So we don't get to talk about much. So I'm excited to talk about this with you. And tell everybody where they can find you and anything else that you want them to know before we dive in.
Sure. I would say the place to go is sustainablesolutionsmedia.com. That is where I and Sunjata, it's Dr. Sunjata, that's my partner in life and in writing and in intellectual things. We both have our work housed there, and we have a podcast there. We publish pieces, I would say at least twice a week. Right now, I'm working on the Tools of Liberation series. So what we're talking about here about intolerance, that was from my Tools of Oppression series. So now we're on to Tools of Liberation series. Check it out, sustainablesolutionsmedia.com.
Okay, yes, absolutely check it out. If you're in the Truth and Freedom movement, this is a subject matter that is, again, so important. So absolutely check that out because they do some very insightful work and have very insightful discussions and posts. So definitely check that website out. So let's dive in. So let's start. I like to define terms because I feel like a lot of people have different definitions of words. So I always like to start off with defining terms. So to start, I would just like you to give me your definition of what intolerance is.
It's basically just like the active rejection of variation. So it goes hand in hand with like standardization.
Okay. So when you say rejection, what would be actions that would be considered rejection?
Like it shows up a lot when like people or systems are trying to erase or correct or control anything that deviates from like dominant norms. And like there's like this, as a tool of oppression, it really reinforces the idea that there's only one right way to do something and everything else has to be minimized or eliminated. It's structural, it's also systemic, a lot of times it will be disguised as like order or progress or like objectivity. Like sometimes people will say, no, there's no other way for you to raise your family except in the nuclear family. That's the only way that your child is going to be normal. If you do anything other than that, you're just messed. It comes up in ways like that. Anytime you feel like you have to fit into a specific mold that society has laid out for you, and if you don't, that you might lose something. That's how intolerance kind of takes hold.
Got you. So, and I know so many things that you named as far as intolerance, they come in real subtle ways.
Yeah, like
so,
as concern sometimes, right? Sometimes intolerance can be disguised as concern. Somebody might say something like, you look like you're gaining weight. Excuse me?
Right.
That's not concern. That sounds like something you shouldn't be commenting on, like standards, sometimes like professionalism. In the article, I also talked about how intolerance can kind of be subtly like a diagnosis, just giving somebody a diagnosis can, in some ways, can be perpetuating intolerance.
Yeah. I feel like that is a big societal problem in general, like everything being like some type of disease or disorder, or can it just be that person's personality or that person's way of being, or you know what I mean? Everything has to have this label and be, just something that has to be fixed, or something that needs to be normalized, or something that is this, deviation that is abnormal in a negative light.
Yeah, I always say, like, I think I talked about that in this article too, that we love to pathologize things. Like, we love to make something has to be like a pathology. We want to pathologize children who can't sit still. Like, what? They're children, the more we kind of try to standardize things, that's what happens, And then what was worse is that capitalism will come in and be like, oh, you have a problem? Let me help you fix it. Like, let me make this a market, right? It's going to offer us these solutions to people to make them more palatable to like a system that's harming them, like it's selling you this medication to make you more palatable for a system that's harming you. I mean, if that's not a mind twist, I don't know what it is.
Yeah, I talk about inversion a lot, because a lot of people think of, because that is like what Satanism is. And that's why I say we live in a satanic culture, because it is inverted. So they're trying to give you a medication so that you feel like a society that is totally out of whack, totally out of alignment, totally cruel and unfit for us to even live in and thrive in. Don't fix that, fix you, so that it doesn't bother you so much.
Exactly. It's like they try to disguise the intolerance as compassion, and like it really is just compliance commodified, right? It's just commodifying compliance. Like we're making people compliant, and now we're like making them pay to be compliant. Now we're fueling capitalism, which is one of the systems that's actually causing the problem to start with, it's definitely something that I really wish that we would unlearn. Many of us would unlearn, and I'm glad that came across in the article.
Yes, because like you're saying, they get so many benefits as far as being the power structure and the control system out of doing this, because like you said, not only are they making money off you, but they're also making you more unhealthy. So now they probably get 3 other diagnoses they can give that might be real health ones now, because of the medicine they prescribed you for the first thing. That's not even something that's wrong with you. You should feel an aversion to living in a pathologically sick society. You should feel an aversion to that.
Even when people try to challenge the norms, it's like, you'll get these comments like, this is another subtle way it shows up. It's like, that's what's wrong with people nowadays. We need to go back to the way it used to be. No, what's going on now is people are realizing how harmful these systems are and are bucking them. And just because something is deviant to the dominant norms, there's a reason why people are pushing back against those dominant norms, right? They're not working for everybody. So
Exactly. No, I agree 100%. And I think a lot of the younger people, like my daughter's generation, like my daughters are 21 and 25 now, gosh. Um, so, and a lot of people, come at their generation. Oh, they're just lazy. They don't want to do this or they don't want to do that. No, a lot of them are very aware that how this society is structured is total bullshit. And
Yes.
they want to participate in as minimal as possible, because why should you have to work yourself to death just to live? That doesn't make, why should you have to have 3 jobs to pay rent in a small apartment? These things don't make sense, and it's not fair, and it's not okay.
Yeah. And there's so much resistance that, that people think they misread. Sometimes people misread the resistance, Sometimes I think that about myself too, that people misread my resistance, or they misread my activism. I think that's what a lot of the young people, when they get called lazy, they're like, you're misreading my activism. You don't know what I'm doing here. So yeah, I totally agree with that. I love it. I was out the other day and I was like, I love to see these young ladies in flat shoes. That's right, girls. You do not need heels. That's what I'm talking about, young ladies. I was very proud of the young generation and myself.
Yes. Yeah, I am very proud of so many of them, because they are recognizing things that took me much, much longer in life to recognize, to see that this is problematic. This is not even something I want to participate in. This is, not okay how we're living and how I feel, the things I feel like I have to do, or just to fit into to normal, quote unquote society. So what do you feel like some of the main groups that are kind of targeted for intolerance?
Ooh, that's a hard one. I think there are so many. It's like all the marginalized groups are kind of targeted. Anybody who doesn't fit the dominant norm is going to feel, not anyone, but I think for a lot of people who don't fit the dominant norm, they kind of feel like they have to contort themselves and try to make themselves fit into the dominant norms because of that internalized intolerance. But I think that's what happens to a lot of the marginalized groups. We internalize the intolerance and we start to feel intolerant of ourselves. I'm trying to think. Yeah, I can't think of one particular marginalized group that I'm like, they get it worse than others, because there's so many. There's marginalized groups because humans are so complex. There's so many factions and so many ways that we can be different. And that's why it always blows my mind when we try to standardize things like this, because you cannot make humanity simple, and nor should we want to. Biodiversity is so important, Why wouldn't we want to cultivate diversity? Why wouldn't we want to cultivate, different perspectives?
Yeah. And I feel too like intolerance, and again, they do this in very subtle ways, is promoted so much through the media, because it also feeds into their divide and conquer strategy. If I'm a Democrat, I'm intolerant of all Republicans, or I'm not a good Democrat. If I'm Christian, I'm intolerant of all Muslims, otherwise I'm not a good Christian. You know what I mean? So they're building this intolerance into everything. And it's just being promoted over and over in such a repetitive way. People don't even sometimes realize how intolerant they become of anyone that has a different opinion on anything other than them, or a different belief system or anything.
I think a lot of people have also just internalized their intolerance so much. It teaches people to reject themselves first. They shrink, they hide, they suppress themselves. And it basically just creates a culture where everyone's just trying to feel safe,
Yes.
And that is a lot of times at the expense of their authenticity. You don't really get to really be yourself because you're trying to, be someone else. And I think a lot of people espouse intolerance the way they do so they can feel safer, right? So they can be like, look, I think the same thing as you, and then, and it has ripple effects, so many ripple effects in communities and just the way that the macro relationships, work out, and the way that there's huge ripple effects on the macro relationships when we're intolerant of each other in the micro relationships,
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. Yeah, that kind of leads into the next question. So how does intolerance lead to rejection and community breakdown? Because I really do feel like it breaks down community. And I got a comment in here. Let me in the chat. Soul commented, whoever isn't promoting, participating in, and or evolving the mind control is negatively targeted by the media. Yes, I agree with that 100%. What do you think about that comment, Shani?
I mean, yeah, sometimes I try to think about the enemy as more like like the systems. So I don't know if I'm wondering about the mind control. I'm like, ooh, who's behind it, or is the system just serving itself?
Yeah,
It's just doing what it's designed to do.
yeah, but I definitely those out here speaking truth and freedom, huge target group, because that's the group that they're most afraid of. You know what I mean? People that are out here speaking the truth, talking about what's really going on, the layers and layers beneath the below the surface layers, because that is what will resonate with people that are ready somewhere way deep inside that they can't get to, because all of us are like, especially the more in tune, the more awake and more conscious you become, we're human lie detectors. So when you are presented with certain truths, it is just going to resonate. So yeah, I feel like the truth and freedom community is definitely a community that is very heavily demonized. They're the ones who came up with the term conspiracy theorists and things like that, to just totally marginalize the entire movement, that entire group of people as just, tinfoil hat. They're crazy. They're making all this up, even though you can look around and see everything that they're saying is happening right before your eyes.
I mean, there's definitely lots of white folks who try to tell Black folks that racism doesn't exist. So I understand what you mean, the gaslighting.
Yes. Yeah. Serious gaslighting going on. So, but yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Communities, right? Like what causes, how does intolerance,
how does that lead to the community breakdown?
Yeah. When you're so busy trying to be safe and you're not able to be authentic, that can be felt, like you said, like human lie detectors. There's this unspoken shame for a lot of us. We end up feeling like we're in competition for, status, etc. We have this scarcity mindset. And so we all start to feel we're performers, and of course that's going to fracture trust, because we're not even able to be ourselves. We're not even seeing the real people that, who these people really are. And when people are feeling judged or pathologized, it's harder to show up as your full self. That's going to lead to more shallow connections, and if your connections are kind of shallow, then high burnout, feelings of emotional disconnection, because you're not really truly getting to be, who you really are. So there's so many ways that intolerance, ripples out to those macro relationships.
Yes, I agree so much, because authenticity is key to growth, in every, real growth, spiritually, mentally, emotionally. You have to be able to be authentic and to resonate with the universe. Authenticity has a very specific frequency. So in order to even resonate with the universe and with source energy, we have to find our way back to authenticity and feel okay with being ourselves. Okay with being ourselves just how we are right now. And that's not to say we're excusing parts of ourselves that aren't healed, or parts that we're still struggling through. It's not about that. It's just accepting this is where I am right now. This is who I am right now. And that's okay.
Yep. Authenticity is definitely so rooted in self-awareness. I very much agree with that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, how can you even create real relationships and have real community if everyone, like you said, is just performing? If I'm just putting on the role of the person who I feel like you think I should be, I'm going to look how you think I should look. I'm going to act like how you think I should act. I'm going to do everything so that you'll accept me into this group, but you're accepting a fake version of me. So what does it really even matter?
of us, performance is exhausting for a lot of us.
Very exhausting.
People manage to hold that burden or that weight longer. But one of the things I've noticed is that as people get older, they really start shedding that they, wait, can I curse here? Can I say a curse word?
Yes, say whatever you want.
I don't give a fuck. You know what I mean? By the time they get up there in the age, they're like, I don't give a fuck. I definitely have seen older people like come out of the closet later, or maybe not really come out of the closet, but date who they want to date later in life, because they're just like, you know what? That's it. I'm done here. So I do think there's like wisdom and authenticity. I try to put those things together, because when we're authentically ourselves, like that wisdom is more accessible to us,
Yes. Yes. That is very true. Because because you can only get in touch so much with your spirit, with your higher self. You're just very limited when you're not coming from a sincere, authentic place. So,
and it's like a sincere place of love for that person too, and I think that's the real reason why a lot of people struggle with authenticity, is because they don't like who they are. Who they are doesn't align with who they aspire to be. And I live there. I really understand. Like, I'm not always who I am is not always who I aspire to be. So, we're all human in that way. But I think the more we develop, this love for ourselves and tolerance for ourselves and for others, and the more we can accept variation and diversity, the better off we'll be, and without these like oppressive systems like, capitalism and patriarchy, et cetera, we probably would have more space to hold complexity. We probably would have more emotional spaciousness if we weren't always trying to feel safe, if we weren't always in survival mode, and we knew we could be accepted.
Yes. Yeah, I think that being in 24/7 survival mode has so much to do with it, because people don't even feel like they have time to even reflect on anything. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm just trying to survive. I'm just trying to eat. I'm just trying to have a roof. And I get it. So yeah, they've created a self-perpetuating little machine, little hamster wheel for us to be on. So yeah, we definitely have to wake up to that. And the more we wake up to it, the more we can support one another on our journeys. Because like you said, it's about development. We have to develop these things, because it is not how we were raised. We were programmed in the opposite direction. So we have to develop that self-care and that self-love.
And unlearn and learn at the same time. It's like, it's hard. But I will say, the way we were talking about how proud we are of like the younger generation, I do think that's because parenting in general is becoming more involved emotionally. We're healing and we're trying to pass those things on to our children. So hopefully the next generation is going to be even more like, along the spectrum of being able to accept and not just accept, but value diversity and variation.
Yes. Because it's beautiful. Like you said, who would want a society of people and they're all just the same personality, same looks, same. That would be so incredibly boring, and it would kind of defeat the purpose of coming here on the earth and having this experience.
Right. And diversity, like it's not a problem. Like, it's not a problem to be solved. We should think of it as a resource, because when we are intolerant, we miss out on creativity. We miss out on like emotional depth and adaptability, and all of those things lead to more collective resilience, more collective intelligence.
I agree 100%. So, so in your opinion, so how is humanity and community negatively impacted when we stifle diversity and uniqueness? I think you kind of started down that path. So, because like you were saying, it cripples us in a lot of ways. Can you explain more?
It leads to so much sameness, like we were talking about, and that like leads to, like stagnation. And we talked about this earlier too, like just like in nature, biodiversity is what leads to healthy ecosystems, start to mess with the biodiversity, or when biodiversity is low, those ecosystems are not healthy. And I think it's the same way with humans and human thought. And also when we're so like, when we aren't really, we lose a lot of our empathy, because when we're conditioned to think that standardization is right and there's only one right way, then we start to not see the dignity in people who have lives that are different from ours. So there's so many reasons why, how it negatively impacts us.
Yeah.
So much.
Yeah. I agree. And I have an upcoming podcast on imagination. I think it really stifles imagination. And imagination is so critical. I think people really underestimate the power of imagination, because you cannot change anything if you can't first imagine what you're going to change it into. So how can we change and build a new paradigm if we can't even imagine something that looks different than what we're doing now? Mm-hmm. Or imagine being a different way if I can't see myself different now. So imagination is so pivotal. And I think when you start building a society of intolerance and rejection, you start to lose your imagination, and it's already being programmed out of you from such a young age in the school system and stuff like that. So you're already getting it hammered out of you. And then when you have stack on top of that a fear of rejection and a climate of intolerance, it's like you just kind of shut down. You shut down emotionally, you shut down your imagination, you shut down all of it, and you just go with the system. You just fall in line because you just feel like that's the path of least resistance, and you stop imagining a better way of living, a better way of being. Like when I talk to people about, some concepts like, could you, imagine a world without money? They can't even imagine it. Nope. Could you imagine, can you imagine not being able to imagine, just to imagine, not even as a real, just as even a dream world. They can't even imagine it. That's how indoctrinated so many people are. And just, they're shut down. Their imagination is completely shut down. And I think intolerance and that fear of rejection has, a part to play in that too.
Yeah. And, our culture has become so individualistic and competitive that it's like even if people are imagining, this idea of collective imagination is not as, because we're so intolerant. I think also collective imagination could be so much bigger than just the little imagining we do by ourselves. Yes. If we were less competitive, we could achieve more with the cooperative imagination than with these competitive imaginations, right? People are like trying to think of an idea, but it's my idea. That's my idea,
Yes.
Like it was like, oh,
let's trademark that idea already.
So yeah, there's levels to this. It gets deep.
Yes. No, I'm glad that you brought that up, because Shani and I actually met through a group called Collectively Sustainable. So, when she talks about the power of imagination and the power of coming together with others that, have their hearts and minds open, it's powerful. It's a powerful thing, that collective imagination. So, and I recommend you all check out collectivelysustainable.org. Check that out. We're both part of that group. And we are actively working to change all of these things by creating a new paradigm, not fighting the old one, creating a whole new one. And that takes a lot of tolerance, because we want everyone to feel welcome in the community, because we want to embrace diversity. You know what I mean? So,
and it's not easy. Okay. Like I don't want to make it seem like, it's so easy to be tolerant, especially have been, conditioned the way that we have. I aspire to levels of tolerance that I do not yet have, okay, that I do not yet possess. There are definitely times when I'm like, man, I should have done that differently. I should have, thought about it from this perspective or that perspective, or did I think about it like this? And that sometimes that comes later, sometimes it comes too late, but it's not always easy to be in community with, so-called everyone, because just because you're aligned in some ways does not always mean you're going to be aligned in like all the ways. And so conflict still comes up, tolerance does not mean that, we're not having conflict or that we're all the same. It's really about tolerance is really about welcoming, perspectives and valuing diversity, even when it's kind of hard.
Yeah. And dealing with those uncomfortable feelings, because I don't consider tolerance necessarily me liking something. I still might can't stand that, but I'm not going to attack that person verbally, emotionally, whatever. I'm not going to treat them. I'm not going to infringe on their rights,
Yes.
which is the big thing to me. I feel like as long as I'm not infringing on your rights and your freedoms, you're good. I don't have to want to hang out with you all the time. I don't have to want to hang out with you at all. I don't have to want to watch what you do. I don't have to do none of that to be tolerant. As long as I'm letting you do you and you let me do me and we ain't bothering each other, I'm tolerant.
Just give me some neutrality. I'm happy with that. And I'll give you neutrality. Like, let's
right.
Everybody's
not meant to be besties or even close or anything like that. But I feel like that does not mean I need to be intolerant and say, okay, now I'm going to infringe on your rights. It's that you can't live like this or be like this because I personally don't like it. That's not okay. If you're not hurting anyone, that's not okay.
Yeah. I definitely I agree, especially about the, we don't all have to be quote unquote besties, but we do have to respect each other's humanity, each other's fullness. And I think a big part of authenticity is recognizing that you're not going to be besties with everybody, right? That's part of your authentic self and not controlling yourself to be accepted.
I think that's a big part of it because you don't want to make it seem like it's La La Land or Fairyland or everybody's skipping and holding hands. It's still real life. It's very real. It's real. You're just dealing with your feelings about something in a totally different way, not the way we've been programmed to just lash out and just say, oh well, you know what, that should be illegal because I don't like it, stuff like that. That's where you're drawing the lines.
Agreed.
Okay. So what do you think is the best way forward? How do we promote acceptance? How do we promote inclusion? How do we start getting over some of these hurdles?
I think like a lot of stuff it really begins with ourselves. It begins with like self-reflection and trying to unlearn the internalized intolerance first, because we can't really be tolerant of other people if we don't even tolerate and love ourselves. So, we need to kind of cultivate acceptance in our culture. That's going to require us to create environments where, people don't have to earn their belonging by conforming, right? Like you have to meet the standard to get to belong. That kind of environment can't really take us to like a place of acceptance. So it's like, instead of asking, like, how can we make the people fit in this, or how do we make the people fit in the system, which is what I think a lot of people try to do. They try to fit themselves to the system, but the system should be working for us. So we should be trying to figure out ways to reshape our systems to fit more people, not try to get more people to fit the systems. Because if the systems are not working for the majority of the people, then clearly the systems are not serving and doing what they're supposed to do. So let's try to get that back on track. But are they not doing what they're supposed to do? What are they supposed to do? Right? What are systems supposed to do? A lot of us, they should support us, but I don't think everybody feels that way. I do. And I think that's what we really need to be doing, trying to figure out ways to rework the systems and focus less on trying to rework the people.
Yeah. And I definitely really like what you said about, doing that internal work self, learning to be tolerant with yourself first. That was a big thing. And it's something I still work on, a big thing for me because I was so critical of myself. Like, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And it's like when you're like that, it's going to automatically spill out and over. So it has to start there. It has to start with that unconditional love and acceptance of yourself first. And, that's where all that good old shadow work comes in. It start dealing with all those things that you've been repressing and suppressing and blocking out and, doing everything to not, sit with it mm-hmm. and look at it, at the root level. So that's, I think, hugely important. And I'm glad you brought that up, that everything, and I talk about that a lot on my podcast, everything starts in here. It starts with you. There's nothing you can do out here if you're not willing to do nothing in here. Nothing. You can forget it. Whatever you were thinking about, you can forget it, because it's not going to realize itself. It's not going to manifest in the fullness. It's only going to manifest in a very artificial way, even if you feel like, oh, I did do. No, it's going to be because you never did anything in here. It all starts in here.
Yes, agreed. It starts with us, and it starts with our micro relationships. That was the premise of the blog that I originally started, which was Sustainable Relationships. And now Sustainable Relationships is on sustainablesolutionsmedia.com. That was the premise, is that if we can heal our micro relationships, then the macro relationships, including the relationships with the environment, will be healed. Because just like cells in a body, like each of your cells needs to be healthy so that your body can be healthy. And if each human is a cell and all of us are living in an ecosystem, like we need to be interacting with each other the same way that cells that are near each other need to be interacting with each other, cooperatively, collaboratively, and with tolerance, as much as possible. So I'm glad you agree. And actually, I was just writing today. I just published an article today about unconditional love. So it's fun that you say that. And the whole thing ended up just being about unconditional love for oneself. That's not what I intended, but that's how it went. I actually really struggled to write it, and that's how it went. Like I went to write about unconditional love, and I was like, the only one that matters is the one you have for yourself.
Yeah, because it's automatically going to flow outward if it starts in there. And you brought up a really good point, because so many people, constantly are talking about they want the world to change. I want the world to change, but they're not willing to change anything about themselves. None. Zero. How can the world change if none of the people in it are willing to change? We are what's making up a big part of the world. You know what I mean? So,
when it comes down to it, we are the systems. Like we are. And so if we can make the changes ourselves, the system will change. It will have no choice because it is us.
No choice. It will have to follow suit. And I just feel like a lot of people really don't think about it in that way. And I know it has to do with a lot of people don't want to do that type of work. It is
hard.
Painful. It takes a lot of energy. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's absolutely necessary if we really want the type of society and world and that we talk about. It's just an absolute necessity that we do it and do the unlearning. I did a whole podcast on unlearning because unlearning is so important, to unlearn so many of the harmful and negative things that we have been programmed and manipulated and brainwashed into from very time that we were aware. As soon as we get here, it starts right away. So unlearning is incredibly important for us to move forward and get to a place of real acceptance and inclusion. So if are you okay with me opening it up to questions?
Sure.
Comments? Okay. So anyone have any questions or comments? This has been a really good conversation. So
this is fun.
Yeah. Hi. Hello. I always have comments and questions. I'm actually there. You know what I'm saying? Peace and love, y'all. Peace and love. Tolerance. I love the conversation. I definitely jive with the vibe. There is something you had just said that, because I was going to ask about something else before, but then you had just said something that I agree with how you said it, Shani, but I don't agree with what you said. And what I mean by that is what you meant by it, I agree with, but the words, how they were worded, I would have worded it differently, because you said really, we are the system. And yes, we are. That is quite true how you had said it. But also, we're programmed to be the system. We wouldn't naturally arrive at the system and at all of the, in my opinion, at all of the immoral choices and immoral tendencies and just the intolerance that we have for each other, and the intolerance down to somebody's choice of shoes that they wear, and down to somebody the way that their accent is because of where they grew up. And and weird stuff like skin color or whatever, that those systems, we are that, but we were forced into that because we didn't know how important it was, or our parents didn't know, and our grandparents didn't know how important it was to teach us about the human brain and the human mind and how we are programmable. And so I just wanted to ask you, because I do think it's an important part of this whole topic. When, at what, not at what point, that's the wrong way to word it. As you can see, I pay attention to wording very, very closely. Are there things that to you are just intolerable? Like where we should draw a line and say, well, maybe we shouldn't tolerate these types of things or this category of behavior? Because I'm of the strong belief that if we say we want more harmony in the human family, more freedom, more, being able to do relatively what we want without all of the hindrances, to engage in projects and in science and in discovery and in art without all of the hindrances from the people who run the systems, not the us, but the powers that should not be. There are some things that we should not tolerate, in my opinion. I want to know if you could expand on that or see what your thoughts on that were.
Well, I too am very careful with my words, so I can relate. I think that when I say we are the systems, I mean the systems are changing, and that is a result of the way that times are changing. And when we say that times are changing, that means the people are changing. What we referred to earlier about like the young people kind of feeling like a different vibe, that's going to happen that's going to happen progressively, that all the way things are now is different from the way things were, 100 years ago, because we are the systems, right? We're always changing. And I agree that we are programmed as well. And I think that's part of what we're doing in this unlearning process is trying to deprogram. And I think the more people try to deprogram and try to unlearn, the more we will start to move more toward the type of tolerance we want to see, the type of world we want to see, hopefully. But, we might not be here to see it. So, we're just trying to make the world better for the people who are coming after us, really. As far as thinking whether I think some things are intolerable. Yes, I do. I personally do think there are probably some things that are intolerable. And I think some people would agree with me on some of them, and some people maybe wouldn't. But I think that it's important that in society or in any community, instead of imposing what is intolerable, we decide what is intolerable. It's co-created instead of standardized, instead of imposed on us and enforced on us. So instead of meeting complexity with, that's not how we do things, and it's so different, and we can more talk to each other, dialogue, and then we can co-create the things that we all think are intolerable, and we can come to agreements, and without the constraints of surviving, without the constraints of like, how am I going to, live, we would have the space and the time to actually do that in our communities. Does that make sense? That's how
Absolutely.
I think of it.
Thank you for your answer. Absolutely, that makes sense.
Yeah. For me, definitely infringement on people's rights, infringement on natural law is intolerable to me under any circumstance. I don't feel like anyone ever has the right to take away someone else's freedom, to steal their life, their physical well-being, their property, anything like that. Those violations are, for me, intolerable under any circumstance. That's where I draw my line. Like I said, I don't have to like what you do or how you live, but when it comes to now you're hurting people, now you're infringing on other people's ability to live free, then we got a problem. Because you want that right to live free. Everyone is born with that right to live free.
And I think that most people who would who we would find ourselves in community with if we were given the option to actually be in community with those who we feel aligned with. That wouldn't even be a problem, because everybody would be coming to, bring these norms. We'd all be on the same page, and that's why I really want to live with and in close proximity to people with whom I feel aligned, so that I don't have to be like, oh, that's not tolerable to me, and you're like, but it's tolerable to me, or I don't want to even have to, deal with that. But I don't want to infringe on somebody else's right. So you can go live with your people over there where it's tolerated. You know what I mean?
Exactly. No, I agree with you 100% on that. So, okay. Any other questions, comments, anything anyone wants to share? No?
Yes, me. This is Tensi.
Hey,
Soul. Good day, loves, and thank you for the conversation. I've been listening in to the whole thing, but in the room, not on the phone. I just wanted to say that I love that this conversation and that the topic unfolded how it did, because often whenever I hear people discuss diversity, it's charged one way or the other, but I feel like y'all brought a nice balance to the whole thing in terms of really grounding it in truth and the core values of what is freedom in all of this. And so I just wanted to express some appreciation for the conversation. And I didn't really have any questions, but I just want to say thank y'all.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments, anything? Going once, going twice? No? Okay. Well, Shani, I want you again to tell everyone where they can find you online.
SustainableSolutionsMedia.com.
Okay. So, and I want to thank you again for joining me on the podcast. This has been a great conversation.
Thank you for
like I said, a necessary conversation too. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I said, thank you for inviting me. I really enjoyed it.
I'll definitely have to have you back on. I would really like to talk to you about unconditional love. I think that would be a great topic to really dive deep into. So I would love to have you back. And again, thank you so much. And as always, thank you all for joining the podcast live. And for those of you watching after, please visit the website, affirmlifedaily.com. Follow on social media at Affirm Life Daily. On both platforms, there's just tons of information, tons of resources. Check out some of the previous podcasts on the website or on YouTube. Your support is necessary on my mission to spread truth and freedom through natural law. And again, thank you so much. Everyone have a wonderful evening. Infinite grace, love, and gratitude.